left me on the edge of my seat. Last October, I finally sought to bring that same magic I felt to Hartwick. First reaching out to the Belonging Center, formerly DEIB. Things were going pretty well, with all parties confident of a smooth setup. That is, until January rolled around. I'm sure most of you can assume what came next, with previous funding being slashed entirely. I had sincerely lost hope for a while, but with the help of SGA, Computer Science Club, President Mullen, and AR, we have made this event a reality. After finally having the privilege of meeting her this week, I could immediately tell that I had met an artist. Her ability to see even the smallest detail, like a dead male mosquito on a door window, or her infatuation with liminal spaces, confirmed my belief. With all that being said, arriving all the way from Vancouver, Canada, please give a warm welcome to tonight's guest speaker, Talia Mair.
Hello again. Let me just turn off on me? Okay, you're gonna have to stand by for a second as I type in the password they've provided. First try, all right, cool. All right, so before we go into the presentation proper, I've got a little game activity that I wanna do. This is sort of just like a thing I've been obsessed with bringing up at social gatherings. And it revolves around the idea of what we believe in and what we don't believe in. But in order to start that off, I'm going to need a volunteer from the audience. So if I could have somebody put their hand up. Oh, everyone's very afraid. Okay, right in the front with the red on. I can't recall your name. What's your name? Mackenzie, could I get you to stand up and just spin around so everybody can get a look at you? All right, we have now all seen the Kenzie. Oh, I was progressing the wrong presentation. Whoops. So this was supposed to be for Mackenzie spinning around. And so here is us all staring at Mackenzie. And so, apologies. I'm going to need to just kind of restart that slide. Okay. So we have Mackenzie. And so I would like you to raise your hand if you believe in the existence of Mackenzie. So if you believe that there is such a thing as a Mackenzie that exists out there in the world. Notably, Mackenzie, you haven't raised your hand. You might have a word to say with Descartes or some of the philosopher greats. All right, so Mackenzie, you can sit back down. Let's instead discuss not somebody that's literally in the room, but something that we've maybe seen before, but not quite. Raise your hand if you believe in the existence of sheep, that if such a creature like that could exist. We have a lone holdout over here, I've noticed. Okay, never mind, all right. Immediately crumbling to peer pressure. Okay. But what about something that's a bit more obscure? What about this thing? Do we believe in the existence of narwhals? I'm seeing some hands go up. No, we got a holdout over here. No, okay, narwhals, they're not real. They're not going to get to you. This is all just a psyop. All right, but what about Bigfoot? This guy believes in Bigfoot. Look how excited he is to be holding that cast. You want to raise your hand if you believe in Bigfoot? No one. Nobody? No, I'm seeing some half an hour. Okay, so you don't believe in sheep, but you believe in Bigfoot. I can so get behind that. All right. Got to go to the next one. All right, what about unicorns? I mean, they're just like a horse. Okay, your hand up was immediately. All right. For those who are holdouts, I have some evidence about the corns in question. Did you know the unicorn is in the Bible? It's talked about like it's just a real animal that exists. It even says here, to think of the biblical unicorn as a fantasy animal is to demean God's word, which is true in every detail. Now, this is just some website when I looked up, are unicorns real? So I'm not saying this is the best source in the world, but it is in the Bible. That part is true. So have we changed anybody's mind on the unicorn? Just show of hands. Less people have put their hands up now. Did the Bible, okay, so you're changing, okay, so the Bible was less compelling than I was hoping. All right, what about dinosaurs? What about these giant lizards? Okay, we've got almost everybody. No dinosaurs for you. Okay, oh, no, never mind. It's just always, you just like me pointing at you. That's just what you're going for. Okay, what about aliens? What about space creatures? Okay, so I'm not talking about, I'm not saying there's like some microbes way out there. I'm talking like with this guy. Like I'm talking like little green men. No, I'm not convincing you guys all. This is doing the opposite of that. All right. Well, this final creature that I'm going to talk about, unlike all of these other animals, is much more bizarre, much more mysterious. So what I'm going to need to ask you is raise your hand if you believe in yourself, if you believe that you can do it, if you can cut it, so to speak. I'm seeing a holdout from, oh no, I point at you and you put your hand right up. It's like the drill sergeant, you're going to do as you're told. All right, so although a lot of these sheep and narwhals and such are going to have very little to do with this presentation, the theme of belief, particularly believing in yourself, is going to have a lot to do with this presentation. So now we're on to the presentation proper, because it's not all going to be sheep the whole way through. So hi, I'm Talia Mair, like Josie mentioned before. More commonly online, I'm known as It's the Talia. I'm a Canadian independent games developer. And if you've had your pulse on like the scene of indie games for the last couple years, you've probably seen something of mine. I'm the developer of Brutal Orchestra, the upcoming Clown Meat, Swallow the Sea, and Perfect Vermin, which I'm pretty sure the first ones that Josie saw on Manly Badass Heroes channel. He's a YouTuber, and I have a lot to thank to him. But I've also worked on a bunch of smaller and weirder projects, such as Heatstroke, Pit of Babel, and the incredibly bizarre Arrowswept. But before that, I even worked on a whole bunch of student projects, such as Devour, All Hail the Heat Death, and Robo Rapture. But before I was able to release any of these projects or even work on them in the slightest, there was a really important lesson that I needed to learn more or less the hard way. And that was I needed to stop waiting for me. I needed to stop waiting for myself. And to explain what I mean there exactly, I need to go back to a period, well, I need to talk less about It's the Talia, the performer and game designer, and talk more about Talia Mair, the human being behind all that. And so, like I mentioned, I'm from Canada. If you were to walk from here to my house, it would take you 1,041 hours. And also, fun fact, I'm a woman like my grandma. This is my eclectic slide of a bunch of pictures of my grandma and things that she likes. Big fan of the picture where she has gum in her mouth and appears to be screaming. And also, I'm a lesbian. When I was making this, it was very late at night, and for some reason, Femme Pinhead from the latest Hellraiser movie, I was like, yeah, that feels right. And I still kind of feel that. In fact, I love women so much, I actually have 3 beautiful girlfriends, and the 4 of us live together in a small apartment above our Transylvanian landlord. And speaking of trans, we're actually all transgenders. So it's like floor 1, the Transylvanian, floor 2, the transgenders. So those are all components that make up myself as both a person and a developer. But for most of the story, I need to go back to a period of time where I was like a lanky teenage thing who didn't know any of this was in my life's path at all. I was what other trans people playfully call an egg. And so there's a specific moment at the beginning of my career, honestly, the very first moment that I want to take you all back to. And in that specific moment, I was standing on my parents' back porch in the summer heat. I was watching the shadow of the house behind me right underneath my feet. And it sounds kind of silly, but I had never really noticed a shadow move before. I had never really paid attention to one long enough. But needless to say, I was transfixed by this shadow. I was watching it creep inch by inch by. And then the world got dimmer. And it got dimmer. Why is it not getting dimmer? No, the world got dimmer and got darker. And then finally there was a moment where it happened, where I saw the shadow reach the edge of the porch and then drop down to the grass below. And this caused an incredible reaction in myself. I was just absolutely a shock. And I realized I wasn't thinking about the shadow. I wasn't transfixed on this shadow, even though it was what I was looking at. I was thinking about my own life. I was thinking about the periods of time that I have already lived and the period of time I haven't lived. I was incredibly conscious about how finite this all is. And when you have a moment like this that just grabs you by the shoulders and wakes you up and goes, you are alive, start doing something about it, you expect it to be magical. You expect it to be this incredible, undeniable sign. But for me, that moment instead was so important because I insisted it was. And also for me, that art that I felt the need to start making right now was games. And so this leads us to the exact beginning of my journey proper. I had lots of motivation, but literally nothing beyond that. Well, so it was 2017, and like that, I was a 17-something-year-old. I was near the end of my high school experience, and because I was in high school and had a lot of time, I spent a lot of that time playing Nuclear Throne by Vlambeer and The Binding of Isaac by Edmund Macmillan. But not only was I obsessed with these games, I was obsessed with the stories of the developers behind these games. Rami Ismail and JW for Nuclear Throne, and Edmund Macmillan, as I mentioned, and Florian Himsel for The Binding of Isaac. Now, they didn't really have any presentations like this that just laid out everything they had done in their career. Instead, I had to kind of piece it together myself from disparate comments here and there and interviews scattered all over the internet. And so with this motivation and with these idols to look up to, I followed a step that probably a lot of you have yourself, where I opened up a Unity tutorial and just started like trying to find something that clicked for me. And I learned very early on, programming is not for me in the slightest, but what can I do that contributes to games otherwise? Well, games need art, so I used my father's copy of Photoshop and I just toyed around with it until I created something. And this was the very first sprite I ever made. I can probably write you a couple pages about what's wrong with this sprite now, but when I finished this, I saw the potential in it that ultimately ballooned into the reason that I'm here at all today. A quick aside for any artists or prospective artists in the audience, don't throw out like any of your old art. Just hold on to all of it, because you're going to find a point in time where it's going to mean something different to you and another place for it to matter. So if I'm going to be doing the art, I need somebody to do the other half of making the game, the actual programming. If you're wondering who this very regal lady is, this is Ada Lovelace. She was the very first computer programmer, but I don't think her code looked like this matrix green bars. It probably looked older. And so I needed to find a programmer, but I'm in high school. Here's my kind of honestly uncanny high school mascot. When I looked up my high school and was greeted by this picture, it honestly kind of frightened me a little bit. I remember this costume would just kind of always just show up in places, and there was always this like kind of musk that accompanied it. And something that was a really fortunate advantage that I had was my high school had a game design course, which was hosted by these two gentlemen, Mr. Goodman and Mr. Bigger, who I attribute a lot of my success to even this day. But when I started the game design course, I was kind of disappointed immediately, because I found out that the content of it was very much the same video tutorials that I had already been following on my own. And so I went to those teachers and I said to them, well, what if I find another student and I collaborate with them? I don't learn how to do everything myself, but I just learn how to do what I do really well. And honestly, probably the best teacher moment of my entire life is they encouraged me. They said, as long as you can show up and you can actually provide evidence of what you've been doing and explain it to us, we want you to just run wild with this. And so I found the other programmer in my grade. His name was not actually Jacob Goblin in real life, but he had this very I am a teenager and this sounds cool thing to do, where he called himself the Goblin. And so for the purposes of this presentation, he's just going to be Jacob Goblin. And so we started development on this wildly overscoped game idea, which was called Devour. If any of you have heard the name Devour before, it's probably because of this game, which came out a couple years later. I have nothing to do with this game. I've heard it's pretty good. If anything, I take the consolation prize of high school me was able to come up with a name that was viable for a successful game, even if I didn't make it. No, Devour looked more like this. It was a top-down roguelike shooter that honestly borrowed too much influence from Nuclear Throne, but using the scaffolding of a previous project was really able to let us to kind of get over a lot of hurdles that would have otherwise stopped high school teams dead in their tracks. But then disaster struck. Jacob Goblin came to me and very nonchalantly said, "I'm bored, goodbye." And this threw me into a total panic. I thought, is my entire prospective career just going to be over just like that? Am I going to have to learn how to program? And for a full 24 hours, I basically panicked nonstop. And I This was real. I just felt like it's done. Where I'm not going to be able to recover from this. And I just felt this urge to scramble, just to do something about it. And there was this one name of the one other programmer in the school who was a grade younger than me. And I had heard her name before, and I was scared to work with her, but I pushed through that because I wanted this badly. And her name was Taylor Hovey, holding her cute dog Coco, who unfortunately passed away a couple years ago. Everybody just like, moment of silence for Coco. All right, moment of silence has passed. And so I was kind of scared of Taylor for a number of reasons. One of which was she was in the metal shop always building things that she like absolutely should not have been. At one point, she constructed a device that could only be quite liberally described as a semi-functional taser. The teachers had to take it away from her and disassemble it because that's like really not allowed. But she was a pretty talented programmer for all things considered in the school. So I came into the metal shop with her welding away on something or other, and I pitched her the project. I showed her everything that we had worked on, and she went, yeah, it sounds pretty cool, sure. And it turned out a big part of why she wanted to work with me is because she really didn't like Jacob Goblin. And she kind of just wanted a chance to one-up him. So I was enthused. Oh my God, we're so back. It's happening again. And so we worked together for the rest of the year. Every Tuesday and Thursday, we would go over to one of another's house, and we would sit next to each other, myself working on art and Taylor working on programming, design being a kind of child born of both of us. And there was all sorts of in-school events that we showcased our game at, from art shows to the school's LAN party, where we even set up an entire room like it was a little section of like E3 or a similar like conference event. Yeah, Taylor and I were a pretty incredible team, and Mr. Goodman and Mr. Bigger, watching us work, actually in the coming years came to adjust some of their curriculum after following the success that we were able to find working together. But near the end of our school year, Taylor and I went together to an event called Full Indie Summit. And at Full Indie Summit, there's indie devs like myself now on a podium much like this one talking to an audience. And while we were sitting and watching a presentation that I don't think either of us were quite gripped by, I was talking to Taylor about our future plans with the project, going to school, what we were going to do. And then Taylor revealed to me she had no intentions of continuing working in games. She had no intentions of going into game development at all. She was going to go into mechanical engineering. And once again, this struck me as a panic. I started to freak out and go, but I found my forever partner. I found my forever project. And it really made me realize when a calm arrived that this wasn't going to be an exception. This wasn't a tragedy out of nowhere. This was really just the trajectory of the rest of my life. Maybe just life as a whole, but definitely being a game dev is this violent fluctuation between it's so over and we're so back. And some of you with a keen eye may have noticed this in an earlier slide, but Taylor and I didn't go our separate ways entirely. Years later, we actually reconnected and ultimately fell in love. We actually live together now, and honestly, I couldn't be happier. And so 2019 arrived, and post-secondary was about to begin. I went to Vancouver Film School for game design, which led to a lot of conversations of explaining to people, no, I'm going to film school, but I'm not doing film. And Vancouver Film School was famous, but it also had a mythos around it, particularly a mythos about how difficult the school was. But you steady yourself. You tell yourself you're going to be ready for it. Its location in downtown Vancouver also had some stories about it. There was this story that older Vancouver Film School students would tell, and it would basically go along the lines of this. You've come here, and you've prepared yourself to be worked to the bone, but this school is going to work you to the marrow. Every single term of this school is harder than the last, and that's 6 terms of working 9 to 9 days. Just all of this was exasperated by the fact that that mythos around that part of the city came largely from Pigeon Park. Pigeon Park is this infamous spot in Vancouver, which is at the epicenter of the homelessness epidemic. This meant on the way to school and from school, it was not uncommon to see just some absolutely sickening acts of human depravity. I saw pigeons killed with stubs of bottles. I saw people die on my way to school, sometimes still with the heroin needle in their arm. it starts to weigh on you. This is what I was mentioning earlier in the fun animal facts, where I'm like, oh, our groundhogs weren't as fun because our groundhogs were frightening homeless people. And so this just kind of put you in a strange state of mind. You were seeing all sorts of horrible things day in and day out, and also working the hardest you ever have. You kind of entered a fugue state of never quite being awake, never quite being asleep. A coping mechanism that was not uncommon was to just go somewhere far away and just have a breakdown. My particular strategy was to go to the school's audio room. Once in the audio room, because it was audio proofed, I'd just scream until my thoughts felt like vaguely coherent again. When work ran long into the night, you'd simply sleep under your desk, wake up in the morning, wash your hair in the sink, and continue into the next day. It was grueling and probably the hardest I've ever worked. There was 2 games that were developed by myself when I worked there at Vancouver Film School for a year. The first of which was a portfolio project, really a 1-month overgrown game jam where we weren't able to pick our own teams. It was called All Hail the Heat Death, and you were 4 colorful skeletons that were in the vacuum of space. The main twist in the gameplay was that when you shoot at each other with your little bullets, when they collide in the air, they form a black hole, which then warps the entire gravity of the play space. It was an interesting mechanic, but ultimately underbaked because we only had a month and sometimes uncooperative teammates. My final project, though, was much more exciting. We were working with teams that we had selected, and we had the intentions of making something that was very different than what normally came out of Vancouver Film School. Rapture, the rapture had come and gone, taking all human souls to heaven, and you controlled 3 giant robots that were soulless and left behind on the earth. So when the demons came to claim everything, you were fighting back against them. It was a lot edgier than what VFS projects were normally like. When we told our teachers, no, the final boss is going to be Neo-Satan, they were skeptical. But there was a recurring pattern here of just working around the clock. Not only working on Robo-Rapture that I showed a second ago, but during my lunch breaks at Vancouver Film School, I was starting to work on game design documents for games I'd work on after school. Not literally after the school day, but once I had graduated. Although our teachers may have not absolutely loved Robo-Rapture at first, that all changed when Pitch and Play came. Pitch and Play was sort of the final boss of going to Vancouver Film School, an event where the audience is full of industry veterans and VFS alumni. Sometimes those things are one and the same. For the best of us, Pitch and Play would be an opportunity to get hired right out the door by a company. I even received some of these offers, which is incredibly flattering and were difficult to turn down. My sights were set definitively on going indie. So my attention instead turned to coworkers. Nicholas Delgado and Engad Mathuru were both classmates of mine, and I still work with them to this day. This is kind of just like a fun, quirky thing, but when I asked Nico for pictures of me, he sent this like kind of dead fish staring one, and then a bunch of him just making like frightening faces. I think I was supposed to like pick my favorite, but you guys can decide. Just unsee whichever ones you don't like. And so I had done it. I had gone from knowing absolutely nothing about making games to completing an education in it. So now came 2020. This was the year that was going to make it or break it for me. I either established myself enough that I could turn this into a career, or my savings ran out and I had to own up to the fact that I had made a terrible life decision. And I was determined that I was going to make it. So I set out and made 4 games in all of 2020. And it would be easy to simply just make the game I wanted to make. Just simply look in your heart, find what that dream game is and go, that's the one that I'm putting out there. But that wasn't a good way to do it. We had to think really deeply around the kind of game that made sense to make at this point in our career. Simply making a good game just wouldn't suffice. We also needed to think a lot about the platform that the game was going to be on, where people were going to be playing it. Steam was a really obvious decision. Everybody has Steam, but with an upfront cost of $100 USD per application and a famously hostile community to up-and-coming developers, our attentions turned away. Instead, we looked into itch.io, which is a smaller website but so much more welcoming of experimental and demo games, and with a community that is famously interested in everything strange. It also helps that many YouTubers that are discovering new indie games all the time are finding them simply by trawling itch.io. But when you're thinking about YouTubers that are going to be playing your games, it's really easy to immediately go to the big guys, the Markipliers, Jacksepticeye, PewDiePie. And true, some of these guys did ultimately check out the games that we made. But as a strategy, thinking about just them is really a poor decision. Instead, you want to think about the guys that are guaranteed to show up, and those are small YouTubers, maybe 100 subscribers. Altogether, they maybe equal less than one Markiplier, but they will show up to play your game. And so what can we do to help out small YouTubers? Well, something we can do is structure our game like a YouTube video. This means we have natural downtime and lulls where it makes sense for viewers watching it. Every time they don't need to open Premiere Pro or their editing software of choice is another chance that the video might actually come out and advertise your game. And so the first game that we made, a game that's development started all the way back at Vancouver Film School on my lunch breaks, was Swallow the Sea. In Swallow the Sea, come back. In Swallow the Sea, you are an egg cell in a sea of strange and vaguely humanoid fish. It was a simple concept of eat things that are smaller than you and don't get eaten by the things that are bigger than you. Given a horror edge, this quickly became compelling. A lot of inspiration came from a multiplayer experience called Agar.io. Some of you have probably even played it. Agar.io was purely just multiplayer and had no story, minimalistic graphics at best. But a lot of people were immediately familiar with the concept, meaning they could pick up Swallow the Sea, a completely different game, and understand the gist of how to play. Another game we worked on following these principles was Perfect Vermin, this time with Angad Matharu instead of Nicholas Delgado. Perfect Vermin started in conversation between Angad and I in our breaks at VFS. This funny hypothetical of if time was frozen and you were given an hour, how could you destroy as much of the school as possible? This combined with the lessons they taught us about the destructibility engine in the Unreal Engine led to us coming with the idea quite quickly. But in the game you play as an exterminator in an uncanny liminal office building. It's not much of an ask to get players to start destroying things once you put a sledgehammer in their hands. But once they destroy something and it ruptures open into a wriggling pile of viscera and flesh, I mean, intrigue is immediate. Sort of like how Agario served as an inspiration for Swallow the Sea, a sub-game of Gary's Mod, known as Prop Hunt, was an inspiration for Perfect Vermin. Now, Gary's Mod Prop Hunt, although conceptually similar, is a very different experience. It's quite comedic. You have people running around with machine guns trying to find a stray toilet that's actually a player trying to blend in. It's hard to see a refrigerator running down a hallway and take it seriously, especially when grenades are being whipped at it. Perfect Vermin took this familiar idea and turned it into something unique but also uncanny. For the remaining 2 games that were released in 2020, though, I need to ask an important question. That question being, who likes to have the shit kicked out of them? Now, it turns out it's not nobody. There's actually an entire, you can put your hand down, it's okay. But meet me in the parking lot afterwards. It turns out there's an entire genre that is for this sort of thing. Bennett Foddy's Getting Over It and Penn and Teller's Desert Bus have weirdly haunted games culture, even though they're both objectively kind of horrible games. In fact, there's an even type of content creator that takes already difficult games and turns them into exercises of pure masochism. This is somebody playing Sekiro, a sibling of the famously difficult Dark Souls games, blindfolded. I watched this stream. He beats the game, but also, why? Well, the why is that there's people that want to watch this, not as often on YouTube, but more on live streaming platforms such as Twitch. It takes what would otherwise be mundane dead air and turns it into a moment of truth or failure or whatever you want to call it. I don't know what it's called when you just eat shit and die while blindfolded playing a video game, but that could happen at any second. And so Heatstroke was a very obvious homage to Desert Bus, but with some fun twists. My previously mentioned grandmother's warnings to not text and drive turns out makes for quite a compelling experience. And so Heatstroke is exactly that. It's you and Endless Desert Road, a small short story to transcribe the entirety of, and absolutely no save function. If you open up the exit menu, it tells you there is no save. Your progress simply isn't worth saving. It takes about 8 hours to complete if you can type at a pretty quick speed. We didn't think anyone was really going to complete it, but it turns out a number of people are more than on board to suffer in the desert. Our other project that followed this principle was Pit of Babel. Pit of Babel, much like its name suggests, was about building a tower, taking Tetronimo blocks that are familiar from games like Tetris and trying to physics assemble them into a higher and higher tower. Narrative would unlock as you climb farther and farther, but keeping with the fleshy and kind of gross themes, the only way to produce your blocks was to grind up your little livestock of red, sort of cute, creepy creatures called rotters. So 2020 came to a close as a success. We had released 4 games, all of which reaching out to very different parts of the gaming community. And so now, what was already the part where it gets real turned into the part that gets realer. Was this enough for somebody to be willing to invest money in us actually making it a game for them? Can we make this 15 minutes of fame turn into a career? And so 2021 began. With Swallow the Sea, we had gotten the attention of a local publishing and game development company called Hellbent Games. They wanted to commission Nico and I to make a competitor of the game Slay the Spire, but they also wanted a darker and more narrative twist along the lines of something like Darkest Dungeon. Well, It was a tall order. The biggest thing that they were asking for is that they kept reiterating they wanted a big game. They wanted a game where it took roughly 80 hours to be able to complete the entire experience. Now, for reference, here's 80 hourglasses. That's a lot of hours. And for greater reference, if you took every single game I had previously made and played them back to back, it would take you about 2 hours. So Nico and I did what our job was. We got to researching, looking at other games that had tried to do something similar. Two games that came up frequently were Nadir and Deep Sky Derelicts. Nadir taking a lot of inspiration from Slay the Spire, and Deep Sky Derelicts taking inspiration from Darkest Dungeon. They're both good games, but a lot of their criticisms come from the fact that they clone their source material way too closely. Our inspirations instead came from outside of Slay the Spire and Darkest Dungeon. There is a less successful prequel to The Binding of Isaac known as The Legend of Bumbo. Although the game struggled to find a footing, it has an incredibly interesting mana system that fuels all of your actions. Combined with a previous inspiration for Robo-Rapture, Into the Breach, has this amazing system of enemies perfectly communicating to you exactly what they're going to do. You can figure out what's going to happen next. It's just, can you keep it in your head and can you puzzle it together? And so, early iterations of Brutal Orchestra began. This project originally started in my lunch breaks as I was jotting down ideas about how to possibly make a game using Bumbo's systems, but sort of different, and we playfully called it Ball Wizards at the time, not wanting to attach a theme because we could turn it into anything. And originally there was elements that were experimented with it, such as it being real time, although it turned out playing the game in real time kind of felt more like doing taxes than actually playing a video game, so that was quickly scrapped. And so as time wore on, we got closer and closer to what became the ultimate vision for the game. Cough now? Oh, it's back. Hello. So we met our 80-hour request. We were able to make an entire odyssey of an experience. And so the question was, well, how did Brutal Orchestra perform? We had, an entire budget we had to pay back before we'd see even a cent of it. Well, before I can kind of explain the context of how Brutal Orchestra did, I need to kind of talk about some common trends in how games release. Hell is Other Demons is a good game. I've played it and I've enjoyed it, but it falls into a very common trap of exponential decay. These are just the Steam reviews, as the actual money they make is private data, but you can get a rough guess of how well a game did based on this. Exponential decay is when it starts off with all the reviews right at the very beginning, and then over time it just trails off. This is just something that kind of happens. It's a very common fate of a lot of games. There are outliers, however. Games such as Hylix are cult classics, going for years being undiscovered, and then something, maybe being played by a content creator, or maybe being, or in the case of Hylix, its sequel coming out, causes it to suddenly explode in popularity and never quite go back to being unknown. Brutal Orchestra didn't really do either of these things, which was a really pleasant surprise. Its reviews actually stayed very consistent over time. And Brutal Orchestra actually reviewed incredibly well, coming out to a 98% positive review score. This wasn't something that just sort of happened, though. We didn't just release our baby out into the world and then go, all right, let's just see what happens. We had all sorts of content drops, including, updates, crossover events with YouTubers, or promotionals for the game's anniversary. So we were very much always trying to give reasons for new players to check out the game and old players to come back and see how it's changed. And so we entered a post-Brutal Orchestra world. We were now past that and needing to make the next big game. And with that came fear of the sophomore slump. The fear that all of that success was just luck, and the next thing was going to reveal that maybe we were hacks all along. And so I started working with a new collaborator who was simply known as West. We had never worked on anything before, but after seeing some of their previous platformers, I was quite impressed. And so West and I set out working on Clown Meat. It was different than Brutal Orchestra in every way, a precision platformer, shirking the deserts and existentialism of Purgatory and Brutal Orchestra, and instead trading it for America destroyed in the wake of a clown-pocalypse.
Cugini, Ukimeniki.
So Clown Meat was different than Brutal Orchestra in every way. And even though this wasn't a project that's released yet, it was already been both professionally and personally transforming. This had sort of been building for years, but this was finally the point in time where I decided if I was going to live, I had to come out as being transgender. I was incredibly terrified to make this decision. I didn't know how even my own family was going to receive the news. But for my own career, I naturally assumed it would be a death sentence. Everything I had worked for since I was really a literal child could just immediately go away, just because of the kind of human being I am. I was incredibly, I don't even know if credibly sells it enough. It was amazing to learn that the community that I had fostered was already so accepting. And if anything, I actually had more fans that showed up. Even going into real life events, something that I was hesitant about, I was considering maybe just being a shut-in post-transitioning, we would go to in full clown makeup, happy to promote the game. It was no secret that I was trans, and it was absolutely celebrated. In fact, it actually turned out that West is Autumn West. Neither of us knew it when we started working together, but we're both trans. And so work continues day in and day out on Clown Meat. We really think we are making something special, and I'm excited to share it with you guys once it's finally complete. But before we go, I want to share with you an event that kind of resonated with me. I actually have been a guest speaker at Full Indie Summit, something I only attended as a teen, looking at the stage and wondering what that would be like. We'll go back. After the presentation, I had a pair of teens come up and talk to me. They were so excited to see somebody that was also trans like them talking and presenting. And I looked at them, and I could really see in them both myself and Taylor when we were teens, just absolutely full of all sorts of hope and ambition of what we were going to be working on and what we were going to be doing. And it put me in a mood that kind of painted this entire project and in turn presentation, reminiscing about standing on that porch all the way back at the beginning of all of this and watching those shadows beneath my feet, watching them grow longer and feeling a sense of dread. But now when I look at them, I don't really feel a sense of dread. When you are truly living your life as you want to live it and you are just taking every single moment as if it's going to be your last, it doesn't really feel like it's all coming to an end. It just sort of feels like it's you. Ta-da. I believe there is a microphone to be handed out for Q&A if anybody has any questions they'd like to ask. I don't know where the microphone is. I think he has it. Any questions? No? Oh, we got one up there.
So, I know you've enjoyed every game that you've created, but if there was one out of all the games you've made, which one would you say, if you had to look back on it, you would say, that isn't my personal favorite?
So if I had to pick one that was like my least favorite project I've worked on, it would probably be All Hail the Heat Death. It was made early on in my career, and it was made in only 1 month at Vancouver Film School. And not being able to pick the team that you worked on was an experience that taught me a lot personally, but I think the game suffered for it. There was a lot of in-team fighting. The thing that I'm the most proud of that project is that we successfully made something. Some teams ultimately didn't even have a functional game at the end of the month. And the fact that we had some really interesting ideas. I think if we were to reapproach All Hail the Heat Death with a different team, I think we could make something really novel. But unfortunately, I don't think we arrived at it there. It's also like my most obscure game because it requires 4 players and like having friends. I don't know. I think someone over here. Hello.
What's your process for like turning your ideas into when it's actually like time to turn them into a game? What's your like process for that? Or, like,
Oh boy, that is like a huge question, but I'll do my best. So I kind of have things that make me. I talk about how there's things that are beautiful to me. And it's not necessarily like I'm like, oh, look at that flower, that's so beautiful. It's just like things will just kind of grab me and I'll be like, there's something here. There's something really compelling about that. For instance, right now, I really want to make a game about like aliens and like UFOs and stuff, which is probably why they like snuck into the presentation. And so I've just been like, I've just been like going into all sorts of crazy, like I've been buying like VHSs from like thrift stores and like watching old like alien documentaries and stuff. And it's kind of just, I'm going to flood my brain with that until either I wasted time but had fun or it like amounts into something. I noted earlier on that the earliest draft of Brutal Orchestra was called Ball Wizards, and that wasn't because it was just like, it's a funny name. Sometimes I'll have a mechanical idea for a game, like how it would mechanically function, the actual gameplay, but it's not connected to anything aesthetic, and that's intentional. That's so we can pick it up and go, oh, well, this is a system that sounds really compelling and interesting, and then you can skin it any which way. So sometimes you go bottom up, which is with you have the design and how mechanically everything's going to work, and then you put a story and stuff onto it. And sometimes you have a story and you go bottom down. So for the bottom down, I'd start with UFOs and aliens, and then how do we make a game that's compelling about that? Hopefully that answers your question, but it's like a huge question, giant even.
it was very helpful. Thank you.
You mentioned something about game documents. I'm wondering how you structure like planning out your games.
Could you repeat that? So game documents, or like what is a GDD?
Yeah.
So a GDD is like a master document when you're working on a game. It's like you basically write down. So there's 2 things about GDDs. 1, they're incredibly important. And 2, they're always wrong. So with a GDD, you write down basically how the entire game should work. Like literally everything. If an enemy can move in a specific way, if there's a certain type of wall that's breakable, you write as much of it down as possible. Now, when you actually start making the game, a lot of that is going to change. A lot of it, you're going to realize that that's not fun. This needs to shift. So it goes from being an incredibly useful tool to kind of like a fun artifact by the end of development. On bigger teams, they do keep the GDD updated and they keep changing it and changing it. But when you're working indie, it's usually at the beginning. So when we haven't made a video game at all, we can all agree this is what we're making. This is the trajectory we're going in. At Vancouver Film School, our team on RoboRapture took all of our documentation incredibly seriously. I mean, we were making a strategy game. If you are just winging it making a strategy game, you're going to make something abysmal. And they actually liked our documentation there so much that I actually think at least what I've heard from students, is that's the documentation they teach there. They give it to all the students and they want them to look through that and refer to it. Previously, they had just taken whatever was the GDD by the previous term and just like passed it on. But then we stopped them dead in their tracks.
So I guess what I'm wondering is like, how would you suggest structuring a game document, or like not even necessarily one that's fully in depth, but just like structuring like your plans for that sort of thing?
So if you email me, and I can give you my email after this, I can just send you some GDDs I've made and like some notes, because it's like, I know how to answer that question, but I don't know how to like answer it in the medium of we're across the room from each other, and I have the mic and you have the mic.
No, that's fine. I can email you. Is that your email up there?
Is that my what?
At It's the Talia. What?
Yeah, that's so when I made this, I was on Twitter, but like Twitter like kind of like caught fire and like melted into some sort of like Elon Musk soup thing, and so I'm not really on Twitter anymore. I'm on Blue Sky, but if you just look up It's the Talia, I'm pretty easy to find. I'm also here in front of you, so I can like come up to you.
That's
like
fair.
you are not out of range. You are technically still like in danger.
Okay.
You are kind of loud as hell.
I take pride in it. Oh, well, hello. Some of you might recognize my turning around. As someone that really has had, I will say, a complicated road with self-confidence, is there any advice you would give to people that definitely know who they are and what they want to do, but it's really hard because you don't feel like you get like support for it,
Yeah.
or terms of like, you know, I'll just use an example. There was something in one of my classes earlier, and people were being disingenuous about something. I'll probably explain it more later. But do you have any advice on how to stick to your guns, but not like, I guess it's just kind of hard to
Is this like in a social setting or just for like yourself or?
really just for yourself, and like how are you able to navigate?
That's a big question, but I'm going to try to do my best
Yeah.
to like sort of answer that. So it's not that bad, which sounds like kind of like I'm like, oh, like I'm not taking your problem seriously or something. And when I'm saying it's not that bad, it means like even when things feel like they're going like horribly wrong, it's really ultimately if you can just kind of pull yourself out of that moment and look at it on the scale of the entire interaction, it's like not as like terrifying. So I'll be a bit vulnerable for a second here. And at the beginning of this presentation, I had like a moment where I froze up, and I froze up because I was hitting continue on this laptop, and I had a clicker, and they were doing separate things because every time I'd rehearsed it, that's not how that worked. And so then I had a moment where I realized I'm going to have to do this entire presentation from memory, and I can't see my notes. And so I was freezing up for a second there and then figuring, okay, well, I've got to just close that and I've got to just do this. And I ultimately think, even though that was an awkward moment for myself, I immediately broke out into a sweat and I felt like I was going to puke. Even though that was immediately terrifying, it's like, I'm not going to shut down. I'm not going to run away from that. I'm going to try to find a way that's back up out of it. And there's this saying where they say the personal is also the universal. And I think when you see somebody struggle and when you see somebody have a hard time with something and you see them push through it, I think it's really easy to see yourself in that. A lot of people are very scared to like ever open up and talk about what's going on with them. They feel like nobody else is going to get it or they're going to understand what it was like. But it's especially something you learn in writing. A lot of things that feel like how could anybody else possibly be going through that or something similar is actually something that more people than you would expect have some sort of experience with. Does that help? I hope that helps.
Yeah, definitely. I just think, I've noticed, especially with people, I'll say on campus, but that's just a microcosm. And yeah, just I feel like I'm not sure if COVID was a part of it, but
I have a useful story, I think, that might answer this. So I volunteered at a research forest when I was in high school, and I really loved the work. I did not love the environment. I didn't fit in with the people there at all. I worked with my boss's son, and I worked with a bunch of like dude bro guys. Now I was pre-trans and I didn't even know any of that, but I just knew I didn't fit in with these people at all. And so our boss would like sit in on our lunch meetings, and he made a really inappropriate joke about my girlfriend. And now I'm like 17 or 16 or something at this time, and it didn't sit right with me. And on day one of orientation, he said, okay, if there's any problem with any of the guys, you talk to me about it. But if there's a problem with me, you talk to my boss. And so I had a problem with how he had behaved, and I didn't feel comfortable talking to him because it was weird because like I'm working with his son, and also like he's my boss and always around. So I went and I talked to his boss, and I just asked his boss, what should I do like in this situation? What should I like do about it? And his boss just told me, oh, just let it go. Like, don't even worry about it. And I thought, okay. And I was like, all right, maybe I'm not understanding it. I mean, I'm young. These guys have all worked here for a long time. And then when I came to work the next day, we were called in early, and in the work shed, I was basically like cornered where everybody sat in chairs like across from me, and everybody was incredibly upset. Particularly my boss was upset because he thought I was trying to cause him to like lose his job. Now, I agree there's different ways that situation could have been handled, but I mean, I was like 16 at the time. I had never really worked anywhere else before, but his solution was just, brute force intimidation. Just, I am going to shout at you, and I'm going to be so upset that you are just going to, you're going to break down and cry and admit that you shouldn't have done this. And I didn't do that. I argued that what I did, even if it was perhaps misguided, it wasn't wrong, and that I felt that what he said was still not okay. And I had tears streaming down my cheeks. I was absolutely terrified. I mean, this guy's like almost like 7 foot tall. And so I have him shouting at me and his son right there, and everybody I'm going to have to work with for the rest of the summer. And I just kind of steeled myself and was like, I am going to just come out of this conversation and be okay. And that was awful. It was absolutely brutal. I have like weird like stress dreams about it, like to this day. But once you start kind of digging your feet into the mud and going, okay, I'm not going to get pushed over here. The way I'm being treated is not fair. It doesn't ever become easy, but every time it becomes a little bit easier. Does that help?
yeah, that was like exactly what I needed to hear.
Awesome.
So thank you.
I haven't used a mic, so I'm kind of
Hello.
nervous. Hi. It actually is. Anyway, what I was going to ask, would you say that your traditional education at Vancouver, do you think the things that you learned from your professors were sort of valuable and worth the money, or are you more of an advocate for sort of teach yourself, YouTube, like you can be a game designer just from going online and going on Skillshare, or like are you for traditional education?
I'm not sponsored by Skillshare, so until they start giving me money, then Skillshare is not a good option. So nobody's ever going to do the work for you. And that's kind of the thing where a lot of people would come to Vancouver Film School and they're like, oh, it's going to just like fix me. It's going to make me into all these properties I need to have to be a game dev. It's not going to do that. You're going to get exactly what you work to get out of it. Like I had a lot of classmates, and I don't think this is like the wrong thing to do, but because the workload was so heavy, they just chose a class and went, I'm going to take a 0 in that. And they're paying a lot of money to be here, and that was their solution. But I mean, if you're not going to push yourself, so I feel like from going to Vancouver Film School, I got what I needed out of there. I felt like I went in just like wrought iron ore with potential, and I came out like actually being turned into something cohesive. Now that being said, it was not easy. It was not fun a lot of the time. It is probably the worst my mental health has ever been, but for myself as a person, I felt like that was what I needed. But that's not everybody. And for some people, they need something that's a bit more gentle. I mean, when I went to Vancouver Film School, a lot of the teachers didn't take me wanting to go indie seriously. And a big part of that was because a lot of students would say, oh, well, I want to go indie, thinking that would be like an easier alternative. But it's like, no, it's like you need to be honestly a little bit crazy to want to go indie, because you're only like accountable to yourself. And like I have this weird kind of thought every now and then where I'm like, I could realistically like screw up my entire career like with relative ease. And there's no safety rails at all. So I may have drifted a bit away from the original question. But do I think you could go just teach yourself? Yes, I think some of the best programmers, I mean, the first generation of bedroom coders and stuff like that who made amazing games like Doom and XCOM and all sorts of stuff like that back in the day, they just taught themselves. Like, it is possible, but I'm not going to try to give a universal answer to everybody here. Like, I think a college, like, I've loved everything I've seen of Hartwick. I don't think Hartwick would have been like the college for me. I honestly don't think college was really for me. I think I needed to do a fast and hard program, and then I needed to be turned loose out into the world. And I think that's what I needed, but that's not everybody. So it's more, my answer to your question is probably a series of questions for you to go ask yourself.
I would say that answers it.
Okay. Before you pass the mic to someone else, can I ask you a question?
Sure.
Have you had any dreams recently?
Dreams.
Yeah, like, when you're asleep and you just like see shit.
No, I've actually, have not been remembering
You don't have
my
many
dreams
dreams
lately.
like often?
I do, but
Okay.
definitely lately.
Nothing you
Not
wanna
that I
share?
remember. Nothing that I want to
No,
share.
okay. All right. I was just hoping that we were gonna like hear some cool like dream stories, but oh, there's a hand up over there.
I guess to make you
Sorry,
feel better.
1
I
second.
Kind of,
I know you just got the mic, but I just weirdly like feel this urge to say this. If anybody here is like in therapy, if you could tell your therapist Talia says hi, I would really appreciate it. I've just been doing this where I've been going to people and saying, tell your therapist that Talia says hi, and I'm hoping eventually 2 people are going to have the same therapist and it's going to like really wig them out. Anyways, go on.
So I guess this one dream, it's been like not a reoccurring one. It's been like every other day for about a week.
Okay.
And basically, it's this dark environment. There's a
Yeah.
red light that's flashing on and off. It's either a bunker of some kind.
Okay.
But basically, it's like some type of apocalypse, like nuclear apocalypse, is about to happen. And
This kind of just sounds like the state of the world, honestly.
but the strange thing is that there's this general who's trying to like do a retaliation. Then there's this other person, I don't remember.
You're in this dream though, like you're like one of the characters, or you
Yes,
just kind of
I
like.
am. I'm like the one that's trying to just get out of there.
Okay.
Because at this point, it's like it doesn't matter anymore. Because there's this other person that's trying to like stop the nuclear attack. Like there's a way with the defense system or something. Again, it's just fragments.
I feel like you need to like go to your social media or whatever and like unsubscribe to like some
It's
news
not social
stuff.
media on
Or like it's like
watch
getting to you.
movies. I like movies.
You like movies.
So it's like maybe
watch something happy. Go watch like some like Ghibli stuff or something.
Maybe.
Or else you're gonna. I mean, if all you watch is like things blowing up in action movies, it's what you're gonna. Well, it depends. Does this dream leave you feeling okay, or is this leave you feeling stressed? Because I'm like a little stressed.
Because I woke up. Because at the end, it leaves it ambiguous whether or
Okay.
not I escaped and or prevented it. Because I think of the other time, because it happened again. It was the same structure, same thing. It was the same general that showed up again,
Okay.
and I was like, okay, let me try and save it, but also I'm gonna get out of there.
So I was having a series of dreams that were really, really stressful and that were all about death and philosophy and all sorts of stuff like that. It was really affecting my mental health. And for me, what I did is I went to YouTube and I unsubscribed from all of these channels that I thought were very intellectually stimulating, but I thought they were ultimately kind of pushing my mind into a negative space. And at first, I felt like it didn't do anything, but over time, it kind of left me feeling like a lot better about just kind of life holding. I also played a lot of Mario 64. That's a happy game. Played a lot of that. So go play Mario 64 again if you have played it before or for the first time.
Yeah.
And stop watching so much war and stuff.
I'm so sorry, but this is one aspect. This is the reason why I wasn't stressed. Like when I woke up, I was just genuinely confused about the whole thing because it felt sort of real, and it was these other characters in it where it actually was like they all had a different like. It felt like all different like personalities and stories like that. Strangely, was something that coincidentally happened years like earlier in my life. Like different conversations I've had with people, and these like different people helped me out. A couple of them unfortunately died, but it's like the whole thing. Every time it ends ambiguous. Again,
This dream seems almost kind of like personal to the point where I feel like you should maybe tell me about it like afterwards.
I'm so sorry.
No. It's like all good, but I'm like I feel like you're like this is going on the internet like right now. I feel like you're like this is like too much real life lore maybe for this moment.
It wasn't that like stressful or anything.
No, it's okay. Talk to me after the presentation, and I will get you out of the bunker.
Okay.
We will do this. We will solve this. Is that about? I think that's about a wrap on it. Anybody who wants to come say hi afterwards, I am here and in the flesh. But anyways, thank you all so much for your time. Huge thanks to Josie Beckert and a huge thanks to James. Woo, Josie! Also a huge thanks to James Mendez. He drives me everywhere. And also I told someone named Shup I'd shout them out, so shout out to Shup.